Rat, conceived by two parents.
What up, what up?
Old souls, no soul, no merit. Yeah, some of the things that you cherish, we wait for. It's only a dream that you cherish. It's your life, your rights, your parent. You raise a child with no parents. You argue and fight and start yelling. Society's trash, you turn felon. Only logic, elevation over profit. Once you're elevated and then you go for the profit. You know that the feds and trolls watching. Hope you prepared, get more options. Tired of arguing with homies over this dumb shit. You're on the block, but still we run shit. Tarrella's better go get your gun, bitch. Mother raised babies, he raised a thug.
What up, what up? What's good, what's good? No, it's not that. It's my damn computer. What up, y'all? As soon as I go live, my speakers act crazy, just like yesterday. What's good, what's good? Let me see something. This morning, I'm tapping with y'all about when we was doing the Marcus Garvey, they mentioned Paul Cuffe, the first black millionaire. So last night I was digging to see if I could find some things on Paul Cuffe. And on top of the Paul Cuffe situation, just trying to see, hold on one second, my sound, yo.
Native Americans
so
had sitting.
We're going to talk about that, and we also going to talk about the movie Just Mercy.
He wouldn't have been the first Native American to do
and in the movie Just Mercy.
So all of the things we can say
all right, so I got this shit.
He was an abolitionist. He was this visionary.
But yeah, sorry about that, yo. My fucking sound, yo. Tripping. But yeah, that we're gonna talk about Paul Cuffe. I get a little information that's not long, but what I was able to find so far, and just the little details and keys of what they say about them. You can tell by what they say about a person and exactly what they are historically if you pay attention to the keywords. And then, secondly, like I said, I got the lawyer from Just Mercy, the real story. We'll go through that, and then at the end, I always connect y'all back to something historic, and that's where we're gonna go. You know what I'm saying? So. Hope y'all vibe with me this morning. Let's get it.
Had he lived beyond 1817, and of course we'll never know, but it's a good question to pose to significant things that we tell in this story about Paul Cuffe. He was the first African American, and I'll tell you why I only say African American there, the first African American to have a formal meeting with the sitting president. And so, my cousin came to the exhibit opening and heard my whole thing about how important Cuffe's Native identity is. And then he said, well, why do you only say African American there? And I said, yeah, it's kind of problematic, but Native Americans had formal meetings with sitting presidents. So he wouldn't have been the first Native American to do that. And so all of the things we can say about him, he was a Quaker, he was a master mariner, he was a whaler, he was an entrepreneur, he was an abolitionist, he was this visionary up until 1817. He died pretty young and never got to fulfill his vision. And so now there are all these debates about what would have happened had he lived beyond 1817. And of course, we'll never know, but it's a good question to pose to students and visitors as you're touring the space. So we can come into the space. So I mentioned earlier that I did a lot of work for this exhibition with Cuffe family descendants. This case here, the first case in the exhibition, it contains photographs of Paul Cuffe descendants and a couple of books written by Paul Cuffe descendants. And so many of the photographs are of Horatio, his great-grandson, Horatio Howard, who is the person who also wrote this book here, Paul Cuffe, A Self-Made Man. I realize not everyone's standing here to see it. But the blue book, Paul Cuffe, A Self-Made Man, was written in tribute to his great-grandfather. There's also a book by Paul Cuffe's son. And then we have photographs of Horatio Howard at the dedication of the Paul Cuffe Memorial in 1913 in Westport, again, loaned to us by a descendant, and then some other pictures of Paul Cuffe descendants. This case here highlights the two sides of his identity. So his mother's identity as we believe, Wampanoag woman. Again, it's never been written that she was Wampanoag, but she was from this area. And her granddaughter said she came from, I believe it was Harwich. So more than likely she was Wampanoag, but she was from Harwich, as her granddaughter said. And then again, cuffe2nd, father, was from West Africa, most likely modern day Ghana. But again, we don't know with 100% certainty. And so the objects in this case point to those two sides of his identity. On the left, we have a djembe drum, which my son was nice enough to loan us for this exhibition. He said, as long as I give him credit, I used to travel to West Africa for work. And so I picked up this drum and gave it to him and then said, oh, can I have that for my exhibit? This is something that typically only men in West Africa use or play, the djembe drum. And then a kente cloth, which of course during cuffe2kend's time was a very sacred cloth that wasn't for everyday use or everyday wear, but now it's pretty common because it's a symbol of West African identity. On the right-hand side, we have a mortar and pestle, which again was specifically for Native American women to grind acorns, to grind nuts, things like that. And then in the back here, this basket, it's not a historic basket. It was actually made specifically for this exhibition. It was made by an Aquinnah Wampanoag descendant of the Cuffe family. So she's a descendant of Paul Cuffe's brother. But she is a traditional Aquinnah Wampanoag artist and used traditional methods, traditional means of dyeing, traditional dyes, traditional fibers, etc., to make this basket for this exhibition. So it's a really special piece in our collection. The first thing that came to mind when I was asked to do a Paul Cuffe exhibition is how far ahead of his time he was in his thinking. And so within a couple of days, I had no objects. I was freaking out about that. Like, what am I gonna put on display? But I did have this panel in mind. All of the things that he thought about, that he pushed, that he advocated, that were so far ahead of his time, I think were really significant to point out here. And one of the things I like to do, though I change it up depending on the age of the visitor or the ages of the people in the group, is to argue whether these have even been fully realized yet today. So things like African American voting rights, which Paul Cuffe, and we have a document about that here, Paul Cuffe was pushing for as early as 1780, or at least that's as early as we have documentation for it. Again, not fully legally realized until 1965. Some would argue with a lot of tactics that have gone on since then, it still hasn't been fully realized. Some African Americans are still very purposefully prevented from voting in certain areas of the country. But let's assume 1965 is correct. That would mean that 184 years passed between Paul Cuffe arguing for this with the Dartmouth selectmen and it coming to fruition. Same thing with Native American voting rights, or even Native American citizenship. So Native Americans were not granted citizenship until 1924. And then after that, states could decide whether or not to allow Native Americans to vote. And so the last state to allow Native American voting, that didn't happen until 1957. And so 177 years, almost the same amount of time. Abolition of slavery around the same time, he was pushing for it. And the Emancipation Proclamation didn't happen for 83 years. Again, some might argue, and if you have a group of college students, you might say, is mass incarceration a form of slavery? Or you might even talk about the fact that slavery isn't exactly prohibited in the Constitution, because there is that unless convicted of a crime, right? So if you read that amendment, it forbids slavery unless a person is convicted of a crime. School integration. Paul Cuffe probably had the first integrated school in the country. Again, we don't know for certain it was the first, but it's the first one we know of. And so that was established between 1798 and 1800. School integration wasn't law until 1954, 156 years later. And then finally, Black nationalism, this idea that all African-descended people in this country have ties to the continent of Africa, should promote an African identity. Now that shifted through time, what that actually means. But again, usually when you hear about Black nationalism, Marcus Garvey is credited with that concept, but he was saying it 103 years after Paul Cuffe. So again, really points to his revolutionary spirit, right? He's hearing all of this stuff about American identity and freedom and equality. That's the man ahead of his time. And to point to some of that, again, we've got his father's bill of sale here, his father's bill of sale. And then again, his petition to the Dartmouth Selectmen. And what this actually says, he was so bold as to say, if you make us pay taxes in this town, we need to be given the same rights as all of the white people in this town. And because they weren't, this was him, his brother, and a couple of other people in the town. They weren't given that right. They weren't given those rights, specifically the right to vote. So they decided they weren't going to pay their taxes. And they were thrown in jail. But because of that, a few years later, all free persons in the state of free men, all free men in the state of Massachusetts were given the right to vote. So we can't say that he directly, was responsible for that, but I'm sure it contributed to that being changed. Here in the middle is where I explain the shifts in where you see the 2 F's and an E, just the 2 F's without an E, the 1 F. Cuffe, again, is derived from the African day name Kofi, like Kofi Annan, right, from the UN. This is the name given to boys born on Friday. And so in West Africa, you were always given a name that indicates the date of your birth or the weather conditions during your birth, something tied to the timing of your birth, because that's significant in your life course, according to West Africans. And so, of course, as enslaved people were coming over here, some of those names were dropped and they were given Christian names. And some of those names were anglicized, so they look differently, or they look the way a census taker thinks they should be spelled. And so that's why you have all of the variations of Cuffe. But we know that his father, when he signed his will, signed it C-U-F-E. So that's how he spelled his name. But Paul Cuffe didn't. He spelled it with the 2 F's and an E most of the time. You can't talk about Cuffe or his abolitionism without talking about the fact that he was a Quaker. He states in a document, and I don't remember which one, that he's not sure if his parents were formally Quakers, but that he knew they subscribed to the belief system. They may not have been, because although Quakers believed in equality and that every person has the inner light of God, and that, at some point they were all advocating, mostly advocating. I'm from Newport. There were plenty of Quakers who were like, I'll give up the faith before I give up my slaves. But most were advocating the abolition of slavery. It was still very uncommon for a Native American or an African American to be formally adopted into the Society of Friends. Paul Cuffe was absolutely an exception in this respect. And it may have had to do with the fact that he had lots and lots of money and paid for half of the construction of the new building in Westport. He was actually asked, he was the first African American that was asked to speak at the annual meeting in 1815. So he was pretty significant among Quakers. And this absolutely guided his ideas about a free colony in Sierra Leone, emancipation, and why slavery was immoral. And so we have to talk about his Quaker faith, but when I'm giving tours through this area, I'm very careful to put it in the context of the time. Yes, Quakers were absolutely pushing for the abolition of slavery, but it was still the late 18th, early 19th century. So it was not what we would consider today equality or integration by any means, right? A little bit about silhouettes. So these were a way, at a time when portraiture was very expensive.
I found out last night that there's a school called Paul Cuffe. I mean, I guess the school he built still stands, or they named a public school somewhere after Paul Cuffe.
These were a way that almost anyone, because they were inexpensive enough, almost anyone could capture themselves or a loved one for posterity. The reason that we say this is the only known image of Paul Cuffe, even though there are lots of paintings and images out there that say they are Paul Cuffe, Quakers generally did not get their portraits taken. They saw it as something that was vain. And also, much like we see with Islamic art, you're not supposed to try to do what God does. You're not supposed to try to replicate the human form. It's seen as sacrilegious. Now, some Quakers, like William Roach, absolutely had their portraits taken, right? Because they were of a certain class status, and they were like, I'm going to get a painting done of myself. We don't think, or we don't know that Paul Cuffe did that. So as far as we know, there are two silhouettes of him. The one that we have here, and we actually have a copy of it down in the kitchen, which is called Cuffe Kitchen, but I don't think the sign is out there anymore. And a friend of his from Newport saw the silhouette and said, this looks just like him. This really captures his face and his identity. So we wanted to point to Paul Cuffe's entrepreneur.
So let me stop. I just want to give y'all a little bit of background. I'll give y'all a better one. Because she breaks it down, but the way she describes it is kind of dry. You know what I mean? And then we're going to talk about, let me give y'all another.
On January 17, 1759, Paul Cuffe was born a free African American on the island of Cuttyhunk, Massachusetts. While he is little known, Paul Cuffe was an important captain, merchant, entrepreneur, and arguably the first black millionaire who won the right for African American landowners in Massachusetts to vote. His father was a freed slave named Cuffe Slocum, and his mother was a Wampanoag Indian named Ruth Moses. In 1766, his father purchased a large 116-acre farm in Westport, Massachusetts, where he and his 9 other siblings lived up until their father's death in 1772. After this, Paul took his father's surname and changed his last name from Slocum to Cuffe. Cuffe was destined to be a great seaman. Even at an early age, he was fascinated by boats and had an interest in trading, navigation, and boat building.
Okay, whenever you hear, so I don't care if you're listening to the news, if you on A&E, if you're reading a book, or anywhere that you get information about somebody, anytime they tell you that they were seamen, boat builders, navigators, traders on the water, they were Moors. They're not going to tell you in a lot of shit because it's a word that they keep out of books that I've learned in America, unless it's somebody who just didn't care and rebelling against the society like one of their own. But whenever you hear that they were seamen, boatmen, merchants, and master seamen, it just meant he was a Moor, because the Moors were travelers of boats and captains of the seas.
As a teen, he built small boats and, like his father had done, traded up along the Massachusetts coastline. After his father's death, Cuffe left to be one with the sea and started off as a whaler. During the American Revolution, he served as a privateer and ran American supplies through British blockades. He was captured during the war by the British and imprisoned in New York, but following his release, he lived a successful life with his ocean work. In 1783, 3 weeks before the end of the Revolutionary War, he married a Native American woman named Alice Bequit and eventually had 7 children. Cuffe was heavily financially successful, though despite this, he was politically engaged. In the late 1770s and early 1780s, he and his brother John Cuffe refused to pay taxes. He was even briefly jailed. This was because he believed that it was unfair for wealthy landowners such as himself to not have the right to vote just because of their skin tone. In 1780, Cuffe, his brother, and 5 other free blacks made a petition to the Massachusetts General Court. They argued having no influence in the election with those that tax us because they were chiefly of the African extraction. This struggle eventually led to the African American landowners' right to vote. During or somewhat after this time, Cuffe wanted to fund the first public school in Westport. However, some of the citizens did not want to have people of color in a public school, so he actually opened a public school on his own property, and he welcomed children of all color to attend, even his white neighbors. This means that Paul Cuffe was possibly the first man in America to open a racially integrated school. A year before the War of 1812 and 1811, Britain and America did not have the best relationship, and they were sort of strained. At this time, there was an embargo on ships entering with British goods into America. Cuffe was returning from his trip to Sierra Leone and Britain and was unaware of this war. Upon entering Newport, Rhode Island, Cuffe's ship and all of its cargo was apprehended by U.S. officials who believed that it was a violation of the embargo. The officials would not release the cargo, and so Cuffe, in a matter of roughly 6 days, went to Washington, D.C. and to the White House to speak with President Madison for an appeal. He was warmly greeted by the Secretary of Treasury, Albert Gallatin, and President James Madison. He was greeted into the White House and was immediately arranged by President Madison that Cuffe's ship and all the cargo be returned to him. Paul Cuffe was a devout Quaker, as his father was, and he became a member of the Society of Friends in 1808 and frequently met with the group in Westport. At this time, Cuffe had become really interested in the idea of African Americans returning back to Africa, the continent, that is. Sierra Leone, a British Quaker-founded colony in Africa, became the resettlement area, and later, in 1811, Cuffe had sailed to Sierra Leone, and in 1815, he had brought 38 African Americans back there. These passengers became the first African Americans to return to Africa through the movement that became known as the African American Initiative.
You have to go back 2 centuries to Paul Cuffe.
So this morning, first I was giving y'all a little bit of context on Paul Cuffe before we move forward, right? Because I remember when we was watching that Marcus Garvey documentary yesterday, it came up. But basically they're saying that Paul Cuffe, he lived on an island in Massachusetts. And you got to remember, during a time when his father, like they said they can't figure out if his father was a slave that bought his freedom or if he was free already. Excuse me. They said they can't figure out if he was free already. Well, that common sense would tell you if they had a record of everything else. They had so many records, they'd be proud to tell you that if they had a record of it, you know what I'm saying, they would have told you like almost anywhere else that he bought a slavery. It's not that hard to find the sales of slaves who bought their freedom because they kept a record because they had to if they wanted to be respected as free, in case they wanted to call the plantation owner or whatever. So they said his father was from West Africa and his mother was an indigenous Indian. And as they told you, as the lady said, that the Indians, the indigenous so-called Indian, didn't have no rights either until the mid-1900s. So just to tell you, but at the end of the day, why would they give rights to the Indian and take rights from everybody, the so-called Indian, and take rights from everybody else? So that's what everybody got to realize too. A lot of times people think that the Indians is doing better. But they kept telling you that he was a seaman. Like, most of the free blacks at the time during the late 1700s, right before the slaves were free, you know what I'm saying? Just like the Moors signed the treaty. Had signed the treaty and a couple things with the Europeans that came over around the same time. And I always ask y'all, how would they distinguish the free so-called blacks from the slaves? And they show you in movies a piece of paper, but a piece of paper don't mean nothing. I'm telling y'all, it had to be more to it. So, and then they said William Cuffe, that when he came back, so during the time when all this colonialism come in, this man owned boats and was able to travel. Then he came back during the war, because this is why I know that it's something they're not telling us. The Revolutionary War in school, they told us, was when the Indians helped the British, helped the American colonies fight against the British for their independence. The truth was, when you're doing research, when you see the pictures of George Washington and all of them, you see pictures of black men with turbans behind them with swords and shit. Those are not Indians. But they told us Indian to throw us off when those are the Moors. The Moors helped the 13 colonies fight Britain back. And you can check me, do the research. It was the Moors who helped during the Revolutionary War, where they always told us that the Indians helped them win the war because of the guerrilla warfare, like hopping out of trees, coming from underground, shooting. That was the warfare of the Moors. not the Indians. And if you look up what I'm saying, then you will find more information about the Revolutionary War in case you haven't heard this before, right? So during the time, we're still slaves. Like, slavery is just at its endpoints, as we say, as far as like the physical slavery. And he got his boat on the way back coming from Sierra Leone, Africa. During this time, he was able to travel the water. Why? Then he came back, but they was at war with Britain, and then they took his boat. And then I guess he proved he was from here, and then he went right to Washington, D.C. Now, tell me what Indian, that's why when I listen to things, you got to use your ears and really use your mind. The lady said at the beginning that the Indians had no rights. Early on, that came in like the 1950s. Then how the fuck would he walk into how would he walk straight into D.C. and talk to the president? See, that's the problem when you learn your information out of school books and in college, because they're going to give you information, but they also going to tamper with the information as much to keep you captive. Because if you telling me that the same people didn't get real rights to vote or really any type of fair treatment until the mid 1900s, and this was going on late, you know what I'm saying? And this was going on later, then how was he able to walk into now you can say he was a Quaker because a lot of the presidents was Quakers, right? So it's possible. But how, even if at that time, how was he able to just walk into the White House and get greeted? He was a millionaire. Okay, there was a lot of wealthy blacks in history that didn't have the opportunity to do that. So it's definitely more than just a black man with some money who got mad and went to D.C. Yeah, with the pictures, like it's pictures that showed him as dark skinned, and then it's pictures that show him as light skinned. And all of the pictures that they show in the school or in the history books always depict a more fair skinned person on average. You know what I'm saying? Like look at Abraham Lincoln. They had him looking like he was light skinned. When the pictures out of the Washington, D.C. library came out that he was my complexion. You know what I'm saying? So that's the thing with pictures. Or they say, well, we can't prove what pictures are really him. It's a reason. You think that this man is that wealthy, why would it be hard to find out what he looks like? So they say like the Islamic people didn't take pictures. Okay, the Moors aren't supposed to take no pictures then. But you see paintings of the Sultans of Morocco and all these people. But they go back to them understanding that they had to keep a record of themselves because they knew that they were being wiped out of history. You know what I mean? But that's why I wanted to bring Paul Cuffe to y'all. You know what I'm saying? Let me say, he said, I need to do more research on the Moors. I'm trying to distinguish the difference between African-American from them and African-American blacks. The difference between a Moor, I can give you that. And help. Okay. The difference between a black or African-American and a Moor, it's all legal. Meaning that if me and you are standing outside, Keita, and the cops pull up and say that we loitering, meaning we standing in front of somewhere too long talking, or just, really loitering means to stand in a place idly, meaning doing nothing, just standing there. But if you talking, you doing something. But let's say they call because they say that we loitering or trespassing and the cops come. And when they first come up, I tell them I'm not black, I'm a Moor. You know what I'm saying? And you tell them, and they ask you and you say that you African-American or you say that you black. The difference is, this is where the difference happens. Depending on what the person of dark complexion or African blood or what we call African or dark skewed or whatever you want to call it, iron, melanin, whatever. Depending on what the person with this so-called African blood, if the person that call themselves black are not afforded the same human rights as the person that consider themselves a Moor. Legally, because the word Moor is a name that's respected in the United Nations for hundreds of thousands of years. You know what I'm saying? And the word black came into creation around 1780 something, right after they freed the slaves, and that black word was added to the Constitution. But it's not, because a Constitution is a perfect contract. And then after the war and after they basically after they was able to do what they needed to do to get the Moors out the way, all they did was they came up with a new document where there was none of us at the table called the amendments. And to amend means the fix was broken. So the amendments were made after they finally did what they needed to do. So to amend, the amendments work against the Constitution. The Constitution gives rights to all humans, and the amendments take rights from certain humans and put boundaries on shit, if I'm being clear. So the word black appears in the amendments, really. You know what I'm saying? So, or it's around that time. Before that, the word black had no real relevance. You know what I'm saying? So when the cops come, the person who says they're black, according to law, they are considered Christian property. This is the law. Christian property meaning the possession of the Christians, because the Christians were the Europeans that came over and conquered the world and took over America and enslaved them and made them change their religion. So you say Christian property is what it says in the law books. So if you're black, you're 3/5 person because you're not a human being. You're cattle. You know what I'm saying? Your last name already somebody else's last name, so that's why you paying taxes. Now, William Cuffe also, I felt like, well, damn, he must have been a Quaker more so to that and not connected to the complete Moorish estate because he didn't understand that the taxes we pay come from the Revolutionary War, if y'all don't recognize it or not. The Revolutionary War was when they came here, the 13 colonies came here, and the Moors helped them, educated them. But then the Moors realized that the colonists wanted, or the indigenous people, including the Moors, wanted, notice that the 13 colonies was, they didn't want to keep paying their kings and queens because they came here for spiritual freedom and to stop being oppressed by their kings and queens. At least that's what they really came for. I don't know if the kings and queens understood that. But the kings and queens funded the trip, so they owed them money. So after the war, the Moors helped them fight this war. After the war was over, the kings and queens said, well, y'all won the war, but y'all still gonna pay us that fucking money back, plus some for funding y'all expedition to the soil. So they said, okay, now the king of Morocco, or the Moors at the time, told the Americans that a Moor can never be an American and an American can never be a Moor. Meaning that a Moor is the owner of the land and it's his estate before anybody came here. It was already theirs. You know what I'm saying? By whatever you want to call it, blood, tribal, whatever. It was already theirs. So they allowed the Europeans to come over and to be a part of this union. Because they wanted them to they figured, in my opinion, they figured that these Europeans are coming from Europe, even though they got foul ways, but they're running from their oppressors. At least they will understand peace now because they're running from an oppressor. And so that's why they felt like these would be the Europeans that will understand the most. That's my opinion, but that's just me observing. Now, being black is a legal term. Meaning it's a status, meaning you're a foreigner, meaning it's not your land. That's the true meaning of black. So what you're studying, only thing what you're supposed to be trying to figure out is, to give you a clear basis, is that a Moor, like when Obama passed the law for the Moors, they went on TV the next day and they said a black or African American is not a Moor. And a Moor is not an African American because a Moor would never call himself an African American because he knows that it puts him back in slavery and gets him abused, right? And an African American would never call himself a Moor because he's never been educated, and they know that more than likely nobody has ever said anything, right? Loopholes. So just like when your kids in school right now, educate them about the Moors, and they will come back to you in 3rd grade, 5th grade, 6th grade and show you, like the kids came back and said, look, it's in the history book. The only thing is they mentioned them to us, but they never told us what they looked like. So we assumed that they were Arabs. Because the pictures in the books show like Arab people with turbans on. You know what I'm saying? So it's an easy miss, because remember, the mind associates everything with pictures. So when we were little kids, when they showed us a picture of the wrong person, our mind associated that nationality with that. Just like in the movies, when we watch movies and they show us movies in Egypt with white people, our mind associate Egypt with that. That's why it'd be easy to manipulate the masses, because you plant the seeds when they little. The first images they get of it is a misconception. So that's why being black, that's why it's just legal ramification. That's the difference. The difference is if you say you black, then you just saying that you're the property of, when you say you black, you're the property of the state and of the nation, and they can kind of do away with you, but you also have no name and nationality. Nationality meaning you come from no nation. And black people, and just like how Garvey was said, Garvey, he came, he gave him a flag, right? And then he was trying to come up with his own type nationality. That was Garvey's thing. But for that idea 100 years ago, 120 years ago, it was genius in its own right, because I say, well, where'd he get it from? He also was a Mason. You can tell by his pictures. But that's where, when we talk black, and before I move forward to the next thing, just so I'm clear, and let me know, Keita, if you understand what I'm saying, that the difference between black and Moor is not of what they look like, because they're the same people legally. The definition of Moor in a dictionary outside of Webster means any dark-skinned person, especially the African-American, Negro, Ethiopian, Mexican, right? Because remember, America, no Mexicans don't need the Mexicans don't need anything to come to America. Because last time I checked, North America and South America is the same land. It's just the North and South part. North, South, and Central America. That's a Mexican. That was the land of the property of the Moors. Right? So, and the only reason why the Hispanics are light-skinned now is because during the time when the Spaniards came, they enslaved and killed all the blacks that was fighting. And so those are the kids of the Spaniards and like the slaves that they had. And then the lighter ones, trust me, they definitely started breeding to be lighter because they didn't want to be associated with the stress and shit like that. So that's the disconnect. You know what I'm saying? But that's the only difference between the word when we say, before I go forward, when we say the word Moor and when we say the word black, they're the same people. Just one, the black people are still following suit after slavery and the mindset that they kept us with religion and shit, and they promoted it to us. Black power, black pride, black or color. And I showed you the other day that in law, the word color means, in the law, but black law, the word color means from extinguished from what's real, which means fake. So colored people and black people are not real people according to the law of all nations in the United Nations. So that's why the Black Caucus, when they put the Black Caucus together, what the Black Caucus do for us? Not shit, because when they got to the UN, I'm pretty sure somebody told them or was like, well, y'all can sit here, but y'all can't really be here because there's no such people in the books named black people. There is no black people. You know what I'm saying? In the United Nations, let's say there's a book of all of the humans that got flagged. That's what I'm saying. So that's why you need to study. And that's why at the end of the day, no, you don't need no fucking, if by definition, you're more because of your skin complexion and you don't, it's your birthright for this information. Or if you a mix, you are more. Or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So that's that. And I'm gonna move forward. The next part of the conversation, I remember I went live a couple months ago when I seen Just Mercy. And about the guy that was doing life behind something he didn't commit. So I wanted to bring out a true story. I don't know if y'all seen it. Bring out a true story, and then we could build about it. And it was on 60 Minutes.
His name is Walter McMillan, known to his friends as Johnny D, and he's been on death row in Alabama's Holman prison for almost 6 years. Was he, in fact, the man who walked into a dry cleaning store in Monroeville, Alabama in November of 1986 and robbed and murdered the clerk? Or did they get the wrong man? And is the real murderer still out there somewhere? A jury was convinced they got the right man, but you may not be after you watch this story. The clerk who was murdered was 18-year-old Rhonda Morrison, the only child of Charles and Bertha Morrison, who have no doubt that Walter McMillan did it and want him executed as soon as possible. Johnny D says they want to execute the wrong man. You didn't kill Rhonda
No,
Morrison?
sir. I ain't never seen Rhonda Morrison a day in my life. God knows I ain't.
Where were you on the day of the murder?
At my house.
Did you ever go into Monroeville on the day of the murder?
No, sir.
You never went into town?
Never went to Monroe, period.
McMillan is certainly not a typical death row inmate. He had a good job in the logging business, no prior felony convictions, and lived with his family near Monroeville his entire life. Police didn't arrest McMillan until 7 months after the Morrison murder, a crime which had the police stumped. They had no fingerprints, no telltale ballistics tests, no physical evidence of any kind linking McMillan or anyone else to the crime. McMillan's friends and family testified he was at a fish fry at his house on the morning of the murder, working on the pickup truck he supposedly drove to the cleaners. We talked to his friend, Jimmy Hunter. And that was the truck you were working on that day?
That's right.
The transmission was
Out of it.
was out of the truck?
Yeah, I had to clean out. You have
So
to take them out.
You couldn't have driven the truck anyway?
No.
Johnny D's attorney, Brian Stevenson, has appealed the cases of more than 100 death row inmates.
I have never had a case where the state's only evidence of guilt comes from one person, where there's no motive, there's no physical evidence, there's no corroborating circumstances, there's nothing but the word of one person.
That one person is Ralph Myers, a career criminal who's now doing 30 years for another murder. Myers testified he was in Johnny D's pickup truck outside the cleaners when McMillan went in to rob the store.
Some point you heard gunshots.
Right.
When you went inside, what did you tell them you saw?
I told them that I had seen a young girl laying on the floor with her mouth open,
Dead. And what was he doing?
taking money from out of a paper sack, put it into a briefcase.
Did he have a gun?
Yeah, I had told the court that, yeah.
Now, that testimony put him on death row.
Right.
Was it true?
No, sir, not at all. Nowhere near true. So why did Ralph Myers testify against McMillan? At the time, he was awaiting trial and facing a possible death sentence for murder. He says an Alabama Bureau of Investigation agent used that to pressure him to lie about McMillan. So he tells me, he says, well, all you got to do is you go along with what we want you to go along with. And he says, I promise you, he said, I've done got it fixed with the DA, I've done got it fixed with the judge, and you won't get but 30 years.
So 30 years, and you'd be eligible for parole after?
Well, more or less probably like 10.
So you're looking at 10 years versus electric chair.
Right.
Why should anyone believe you now when you're taking back what you said at the trial under oath?
Well, it's like this. I don't know the words for that, but I can tell you this much. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And for a man to straighten his own life out, he must tell the truth. He must try to do what is right, and that's what I'm trying to do. District Attorney Tommy Chapman wasn't involved in McMillan's original trial, but is now handling the state's case.
Let me ask you about Ralph Myers. How would you characterize Ralph Myers?
Ralph's about as low as you can get. He's a scum.
A liar?
Yes, sir, I'd characterize him as a liar, particularly now.
Chapman says he's going to indict Myers for perjury, not for what he said at the trial, but for what he's saying now.
I intend to ask the Baldwin County grand jury to indict him for perjury.
Because of that, because of his
recantation.
Now, if he's convicted, what happens to his shot at parole?
He'll probably get life. I hope he does.
So it seems.
Look at that shit. See, we don't understand the psychology of this. We call it supremacy. I think that we got it misunderstood. It's so much deeper. He said, now this is the new district attorney of that area at the time of this time. It probably was like the 90s, right? And he was saying, I'm going to talk about the white guy that told the truth. He said, I'm going to get this nigga indicted. And he was like, I hope he does. Like, you have to understand, if you even help a nigga, you a nigga.
Seems to me that he's got more to lose by saying he's recanting than by saying he sticks by his story.
He can't lose his life by recanting. He could lose his life for not changing his story. You know, the prison has its own way of dealing with people who are snitches. Ralph Myers is a snitch.
I'm sure Ralph Myers would agree that any threat he was under in prison is nothing like the threat he's under now, having recanted his testimony and opened himself back up to perjury charges, to capital murder charges. What Myers has done is take a pretty radical risk.
But District Attorney Chapman says there were good reasons to believe what Myers said in court.
You said that there were details that he gave. What were the details that no one else knew?
That her mouth was open, the position of her body, the way the way her clothes were, those type things.
Ralph Myers, in none of his trial testimony, in nothing that has ever been presented in the court, has ever said anything about the victim's body that is consistent with the way in which the victim's body was found.
Myers told police that Rhonda Morrison's body was lying face up behind the cash register. But the first police officer on the scene found the body lying face down behind a partition in another part of the cleaners. We asked former police officer Woodrow Eichner exactly what he found.
I found a young lady in the northeast corner of this building, laying face down.
Is it possible that the body was dragged from the counter to the back where you saw it?
In my opinion, no. There was particular dust that was around this body, and there was no evidence that the dust was disturbed.
You think that the body was where it fell when she was shot?
Yes, sir.
But did the prosecutor talk to you at all about it?
Yes, sir, the prosecutor did talk to me about it. In fact, he asked me to testify that the body had been
Because
drugged.
The prosecutor asked...
Because part of this supremacy thing that I realize is, Keita, is that a part of supremacy about having these roles in the court and in the high system is locking up black men, putting them in prison for crimes they didn't commit, because that's like to me, that's probably like how you rise in a society. by taking black men and putting people and getting black men and black women like involved and charged. It's like you get prestige for that.
Asked you to testify that the body had been dragged to the back of the cleaner?
Yes, sir, he did.
And what did you say?
I said, no, sir, I will not testify because I saw no evidence that the body had been drugged.
The former prosecutor denies he ever asked Eichner to testify the body had been dragged. Still, if Myers really did see the body near the counter, no one has been able to explain how it could have been dragged to where the police found it without leaving telltale signs, including bloodstains on the floor.
What we now know is that the story that Myers told is simply not true.
In fact, even before the trial, Myers told 4 psychiatrists at Taylor Hardin and Alabama State Hospital that his statements implicating McMillan were bogus and were coerced out of him by the police, specifically by an agent of the ABI, the Alabama Bureau of Investigation.
So yeah, and if y'all haven't seen the movie, this is what the movie Just Mercy is about. And I seen it, and I'm not gonna lie, it's probably, if you're gonna watch this movie, man, be in the right mind, because it's gonna fuck with you. Like how when they execute prisoners in the jail, you know, like after they was electrocuting them and shit, you know, that smoke that leave their body, it go up in the vents, but them vents is connected to the inmate cell, so that's psychological warfare. You know what I'm saying? So every time they execute somebody, the prisoners can smell it.
Taylor Hardin, I tell the state doctors up there, hey, look, this is what the ABI officer is wanting me to do. He's wanting me to set this man up, to tell lies on this man, to get this man put on death row. He says, what man are you talking about? And I said, I'm talking about Johnny D. McMillan, a man who lives in Monroeville, Alabama.
The jury should have known that a month before the trial took place in this case, Myers had gone to the state hospital and told 4 separate doctors that this is all a lie.
What Ralph Myers may have told those people up there at Taylor Hardin would have been no concern to the state of Alabama, and I'm confident that there was no willful intent on the part of the state of Alabama to withhold those records.
Johnny D. McMillan wouldn't be on death row today if it were just Ralph Myers' word against his. By law, the state needed a corroborating witness to back up at least some of what Myers said. Bill Hooks, a former inmate, was that witness. He said he saw McMillan's truck parked at the cleaners. Bill Hooks testified in court that as he was driving down the highway that Saturday morning, he saw Johnny D. McMillan leave the cleaners, walk over to his pickup truck, and get in on the passenger side, and with Ralph Myers at the wheel, pull off down the highway. In court, Hooks, who worked as an auto mechanic, said he knew it was McMillan's truck because it was a lowrider, a truck that's been customized to sit low to the ground. McMillan's lowrider was also placed at the cleaners by another witness. But Clay Cast, the mechanic who converted McMillan's truck, told us he did that work 6 months after Rhonda Morrison was murdered.
Sure, she got murdered in November of '86, and we're talking May of '87.
So if Billy Hooks says he drove by there and saw Johnny D's truck and it was a lowrider, then what you're saying is that Hooks is a liar.
Yeah, if he drove by there and when Rhonda Morrison was murdered and he said it was a lowrider, he's lying.
You Bill Hooks?
Yes.
I'm Ed Bradley from 60 Minutes. I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. Okay with you?
Hooks was in jail awaiting a trial for burglary when he gave police a statement identifying McMillan's truck as a lowrider.
Look at this nigga eyes.
You want to know anything, go ask them.
But you said that you saw him with that lowrider truck he had, right?
They got everything on that statement.
But that's what you said in the statement. You said he had that lowrider truck.
If it in the statement, yeah. If it ain't in the statement, no.
Right, so if it's in the statement that you said a lowrider truck, and it is in the statement,
if I said, if in the statement I said, if ain't in the statement, I didn't see it. Yeah, that's the truth. If in the statement.
This nigga lying out his fucking face. Look at him. So remember, in this case, there's a white man that said he was driving the truck and the McMillan went inside and killed him, but that would make that motherfucker accomplice the murder, right? And then the white guy was on trial for he was on death row, and they told him to lie and say he did it. This black dude who was also in trouble at the time, and now he approaching him like you said you seen a lowrider, but they proved it a lowrider. Okay, in the case when you study the case, the girl was murdered a year before they arrested him, but they had to find somebody. You know what I'm saying? So his work on his truck, his truck became a lowrider 6 months after she had got murdered. But this one of the guys who they had testified to the state of Alabama. But you could tell in his eyes, and he keeps saying, so did you do this? He keeps saying, whatever's in the statement, he a liar.
Did have the lowrider truck.
If it ain't on my statement, it's true. If it ain't on my statement, it ain't.
Did
Macho,
Bill Hooks really see Johnny D. McMillan at the cleaners the morning Rhonda Morrison was killed? Darnell Houston, who was working with Hooks at a used car lot, says no way, because both of them were still at work that morning when Morrison's body was discovered at 11:15.
And he was there until what time did you leave?
Around 11, a little after 11.
And he had not left at all?
Hadn't left. I hadn't seen him left because there ain't but one way to go out the parking lot.
And he didn't go out of that?
No, sir, he didn't.
You sure of that?
Positive of it.
You got hella commercials in this motherfucker. Yo, you know, I was thinking too, I'm gonna show y'all been hearing about them lynchings. And I know you heard about the 2 lynchings of recent, right? I'm gonna talk about that later.
Does it bother you that a man may go to the electric chair based on dubious testimony?
Well, I wouldn't call it dubious testimony. You've got a man who...
Hooks
truly is a very believable witness when you look at the fact that he has no reason, no axe to grind with any of these people, no reason to say these things.
That, says Brian Stevenson, is nonsense.
He's benefited quite significantly based on his cooperation with the state in this case. He's gotten at least $5,000 in reward money. They dismissed fines against him.
Are you saying that the cops offered Hooks a deal and then he testified?
Oh, there's no question that Hooks got assistance from the cops in exchange for his testimony in this case. The day that he gave the incriminating statement, the complete incriminating statement against Walter McMillan, is the day that they let him out of jail.
Things got pretty good for you after you told the story.
Things got pretty good for me like what?
Well, you got out of jail. Charges against you were dropped. You got
I did my time.
You got about $5,000 in reward money? That's pretty good, isn't it?
Well, we can go tell somebody if I ain't got time.
But isn't that pretty good?
You got a dance, I won't touch it. Go ahead.
The story will continue after this.
Man, these motherfuckers, see, that's great reporting. When you go on
During the
front
trial,
line.
the jury learned that McMillan was not a model husband. He ran around with other women. One of them was Karen Kelly, who's now doing time for aggravated assault in a...
That's the reason why they fucked with him. And he was fucking with a white woman at the time, and the police didn't like it. So we're gonna make an example out of you in multiple ways, since he was known, they knew that he was messing with this white woman.
case in a nearby county.
Did any law enforcement officer ever threaten you or make threatening remarks about your relationship with Johnny D?
Yes, sir.
What did he say?
They told me that I was going to prison because of that nigger, and they didn't understand why I wanted to mess with niggers.
You're very clear that that's what he said.
Yes, sir.
Why are you reluctant to say who it was?
I'd just rather not say, for my own best interest.
I don't know why anybody would care about who slept with Karen Kelly.
Black-white has nothing to do with it.
I would not think so.
Did the relationship between Johnny D and Karen Kelly ever come up during the trial?
Yes, quite unusually, I might add. You know, at the end of Myers' testimony, the state prosecutor stands up and asks Myers, do you know who Karen Kelly is? And he says, yes. And does she know Walter McMillan? He says, well, yes. And the prosecutor asks, well, were they good friends? He says, well, yes. Would you describe them as boyfriend and girlfriend? Yes. Well, would you describe Karen Kelly for the jury? Well, yes, she's a white woman. No more questions.
What's wrong with our criminal justice system is the fact that people want to come back sometime and second-guess juries. I don't believe there's been any law enforcement misconduct in this case. I don't think anyone's proved it.
The prosecutor's job is not to obtain a conviction, it's to achieve justice. And one of the greatest tragedies about this case is that somebody in Monroe County has literally gotten away with murder.
If an execution date is set for McMillan, and that day comes and it's time for him to go to the electric chair, will you be comfortable?
Yes. I'll be comfortable with it.
Do you think it's fair, just? He had his
day in court. He was tried by a jury and they heard the testimony.
You are
tired of these commercials. But I wanted to give y'all some context of that. Now, I want to speak about something. I don't know if y'all heard about recently the two people, I believe it was Atlanta, that they found hung. And they ruled these shit suicides now. Let me give y'all some history of what's been, this shit's actually been going on for about 10 years now. Since Obama became president and a little bit before that. But they found over 100 black men hung, especially like in the Mississippi area, you know, Alabama, out that way. They found a lot of black men hung, but they're like hanging like this. And they're calling them suicides. They're called contemporary lynchings, trying to say that like we hung ourselves. You know what I mean? So even in one of the cases last night, I was looking at the news and the dude was saying, well, we got to check the knot, tie the knot to make sure that there was no foul play involved. I'm talking about like the knot on the noose, so how it was tied and certain things like this. You know what I mean? So if y'all haven't heard about that, it's crazy. But it's all just to go back. Like I showed y'all 100 years ago in a Garvey documentary that they had lynched like 100 Negroes or black people, as they call it. You know what I'm saying? He said, this man yeah, definitely, bro, talking about on the show, yeah, he definitely give me KKK vibes. But you can see it, though. You know what I'm saying? But every 100 years, they strike fear. I feel like every so often they do heinous acts against us to strike fear in the masses to like, you know, they letting the kids know don't try shit. They want to strike fear in the kids. You know what I'm saying? Because you got to remember that the kids are, in this generation, they really a lot looser and wilder, you know, with the gangs and everybody killing. So they trying to strike fear in the youth. At the same time, they also trying to make sure that they keep order. You know what I mean? That's their whole thing. You know what I mean? Give me 1 second. And I'm going to let y'all see the movie if you ain't seen the movie. You know what I'm saying? To figure it out. But this, for the real documentary, is from 60 Minutes. Let me show y'all what it looked this up. So y'all can see that. Now I got a special gift. Let me go. I gotta find out my history. I clicked off of it yesterday. But I really had searched for them. It was a few I searched for. Let's see if I can find it. But it's an elder. Like we don't get a lot of information from elders. And he gave a lot of great information about who we are, about the body. And man, give me a second. See, that's the only problem. Sometimes when I be trying to stash it, I feel like I lose it. But he was an elder. He's a Moor. I don't think Freeman L is still alive. Let me find it that way. I don't think he's still alive. Let me find these videos for y'all. It's not yet. How y'all feeling this morning though? I know I just thought I'd try to get information in front of y'all. Give me 1 second. But yeah, it's gonna be this right here. I would tell y'all if y'all got y'all notebook, get y'all some notebook and some paper. Nope, that's not it. Here's one though. Let's get it.
Mentioned in the book of Revelations, but it's very brief and implied, nothing heavy. She's still a great secret. Rolling? Okay, good. All right. 102? Yes, this is Moorish Science 102. We're doing 101 on Fridays for those that are interested in obtaining their Moorish sovereignty in the Washita Moorish nation, as well as those who are interested in gaining more knowledge of self. That's its primary purpose. The choice of joining is yours. My purpose is to re-educate. That's what I'm doing here. Then after you finish with my course, then you could go to another brother who's going to further re-educate you, Brother Stringer Eel. So we're looking at the circle. I'm not going to draw it as huge and outrageous as I did last week. The circle and the cross. The measure of all things. Everything in the universe is viewed spiritually inside of the circumscription of the circle as universe. The circle that has no center and whose circumference is everywhere is the idea that we have of infinity. This infinity is primal cause. It is not God. It is that which causes God to exist. We live in one universe. There are many universes. We only live in one of them. This is an enormous creation, beyond our ability to imagine it. That's why God is still growing. The first one is still up there, expanding and expanding and expanding. It's just marvelous, man, to realize that you're a divine being when you realize what it's really about. When the religious trip gets over and you realize you're into this enormity, this ongoing, continuous expansion, growth, and development, then you'll have something to say, hallelujah and Allahu Akbar. We have such karma down here that it interrupts our appreciation of what love really is. And it prevents this smooth stream of consciousness from going on and on and on in gratitude and appreciation. But do give thanks for your humanity and your divinity. Be glad that you're dark-skinned, broad-nosed, and thick-lipped, and furrowed hair. Be very happy about that.
Already.
It really is a privilege. We know that because there's a group of people who do not have those human qualities and are less the dynamic because of it. Then we have those who lose it. Albania is a form of a loss of your melanin. See? And as that melanin depletes in the body, your sense of rhythm and your powers of imagination also are depleted.
Let me say this. Do y'all remember a couple months ago, Cat Williams did a show and he was making a little racial joke and there was these two people in the crowd that won't laugh. And he was like, why y'all not laughing? Where y'all from? They was like, Albania. And he was like, oh. He said, he looked at the crowd. He said, when Noah got off the boat, he was in Albania. It was the first time he seen white people. He said, you got to forget my people. You know, they don't know nothing about Albania. And, you know, Albanians don't like niggas. And everybody was laughing. And she was like, the only Albanian we know that like nigga is Kim Kardashian.
So it's good to be black. Black really is beautiful and the cause of beauty. Because out of the darkness cometh the light. We're going to look at the 4 cardinal points first. Let's see how many books he got. Let me see here. I can do this. Yeah, maybe we can.
Now dealing with the handout.
In a minute we will be. Just hang on to it. Don't put it away. Okay? Don't soil these. Don't tear these. If you do, if you tear it, you buy it.
Hold on. Yeah, he gonna get into it. I'm gonna try to find a video I was looking for while he doing this. There's a certain one that I wanted y'all to see. And I'm gonna look on my other phone real quick.
Pass a couple of them back there. They're the same book, different covers. No, wait a minute, I think. Let me see. midnight and noon, I think. Yeah, okay, the difference of the calculation is at noon. I want you to have, excuse me, brother, an ephemeris at your disposal so you can see how to take the information out of the ephemeris and put it into the houses, okay?
Hold on, y'all found it. Cause he go in, but before we go, I want to make sure, because it's important what order you get the information.
The masses of black Americans were miseducated. A concept coined by Carter Woodson in the 30s. The miseducation of the Negro.
Yeah, he gonna go into astrology heavy.
And at the time that he wrote, he was so far ahead of his time that it became relevant about 10 years ago at Spelman College when what's the sister's name became president and gave that book to all of the freshman women at Spelman College. And it was a revelation for them. You know, it wasn't old news. You see, it was something new to come to this realization that black folks in this country had been deliberately and calculatively duped about one of the most serious aspects of human life, and that is the aspect of identity. Of being miseducated is the same idea of being misdirected. For instance, the stores are up here. I'm walking up the street there, and this brother comes along and says, "Brother, where is the supermarket?" I said, "Down there." And like a brother did me, over on Ashby. Glad I thought of that. I had walked from West End to Ashby trying to find I can't even think of the brother's name now that has the old Muslim temple over there on Ashby. His name will pop back in my mind. And I came up to this Muslim brother selling papers. I said, "Brother, where is so-and-so building?" He said, "Back up that way." And I was a half a block from the place. This is a black man, you know. That's misdirection and miseducation. See? Now that's one, multiply that times 20 million, 30 million, 40 million people. If you wonder why our parents didn't get anything done, see? They weren't doing their revelation, their vision, their insight. They were doing the European American's business, his vision, how to get him rich, how to use the labor. Why I'm making these statements is to give emphasis on the importance of knowing who you are, what you are, and where you are. These are the three missing keys to the center of Afro-American, Negro-American, colored American, African-American culture. This is what's been missing. In all of the books that you have read and are in the bookstores, these three keys do not sit at the center of all of those books. Okay? And that includes the concept of Africa, the concept of Ethiopian, the concept of black man, the concept of Afro-American. Those are all concepts of miseducation. As harsh as that may sound. For one reason, they did not define them. See? I remember I met this brother, and you all know this brother. His name is Professor White. I ran into him on the 5th floor in the Atlanta Public Library, and he was teaching a couple of brothers up there about the mounds and the pyramids and so forth. And I forget how I got into conversation. It was some misuse of the term Africa or African. And I just butted in and said, well, brother, what does the concept African mean? And he paused for this long period of second minutes, you know. And my intent was not to deliberately embarrass him, but it was just because he was being so didactic, so insistent that he was right and only what he said was the truth. And that bothers me from anybody. Hell, I'll get up and say something to the preacher if I think he's doing that. Because I'm Sagittarius. And he paused, and you could, when your eyes dart left, right, left, right, left, right, you're searching in your memory banks for either the answer or some fill-in, and that's what he was doing. And he came up with something so far off the wall, I wouldn't even dignify it. I said, no, that is not what it means. Well, what does it mean anyway? I said, I'm not going to tell you because you didn't admit that you didn't know. So I left him hanging there, you know. But it dawned on me in the mid-'70s that I did not know what the word Africa meant. I mean, it just came to me. You know, I've been read since '66. I've been reading books on Africa. And it never even came to my mind during that time to ask that this word had a meaning or to think that it had a meaning. So I went to the dictionary. I went to the word Africa. It's not in there. Until I got to map. And there's this map called Africa. That's the definition it gives in the dictionary. Really interesting. See? And it was, I mean, a yearning thing. And this is one of the interesting things about self-knowledge, the universe, and you and your will. If you yearn for your truth, you will attract it. You will draw it by book, by person, by lecture, by letter, by dream, by vision, by revelation. You will draw it to you. That's how powerful you are as a being in this universe. Because you are a replica of this universe. See? The universe owes you your identity. It is a part of your natural inheritance. See? And it belongs up here. I'm pointing to the prefrontal lobes, not back here, because that's where it is. Where you can't go reach in and get it at any given time, except on those quick flashes where something releases an idea, a picture, a recall that makes you think, it makes you ask the question, well, who am I? What am I? Jet Magazine published a statement about a brother in '66 when they were doing black art conferences around the country, the first period of that time. And this one university professor, a Negro colored fellow, got up and ran out of the conference room screaming, I'm not black, I'm not black. You know, this is a grown man. A teacher was terrified and horrified by the idea of being called a black man. See, that's how deflated the ego and the psyche of our people were. That was an extreme, but it certainly was indicative of the real problem of the lack of, the absence of identity, you see. And from '66 to '71, no one dealt clearly with that until Yosef Ben Yochanan published Black Man in the Nile. That's the beginning of the new cultural renaissance. If you want to know who to attribute it to. But he was standing, of course, on many men's shoulders, including his teacher, George M. James. But he's standing essentially on J.A. Rogers. Can't hear me? Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Standing essentially on the shoulders of J.A. Rogers, who's the author of about 9 different books And this is a particular one that brings that revelation straight home. And this book has been around since 1954. And it still has not gotten to the classroom of any public high school, college, junior high school, grade school, YMCA school. See? I got it. You can't see it from back there, but I'm going to let you see it. Don't try to read the whole thing. I just want you to see the title. Just read the title and pass it across and pass it back. I want everyone to take a look at that. There's a psychology structure in the human brain that allows behavior to take a leap forward when it's properly orientated. It is neutral in terms of the law of polarity concerning success and failure. We are by nature in need of conditioning or programming. Of course, we refer to the concept of being brainwashed. But brainwashed is not a valid term. It's really conditioning. You can be conditioned to fail, or you can be conditioned to succeed. But it's a conditioning. The proper, of course, is to be conditioned to succeed. And involved in that success plan and plot is knowing who you are. It's a part of your psychology that gets correct behavior, correct response. See? We have the example of the child who becomes a problem from the parental point of view because the child doesn't seem to want to do what the parents say. Until you call the child by a positive. Come here, sweetie. Come here, honey. Come here, baby. Come here, sugar. Come here. And the baby smiles and gets up and comes, you see. But as soon as you balk, scream, and shout, you shut down the child's inner structures, the faculties that allows proper behavior, you see. It's the same idea if you call your child every day, and some mothers do this, believe it or not, and it should be in Wrigley's, believe it or not. Come in, nigga, to a child. I mean, I'm not talking 50 years ago, I'm talking about yesterday, you know? If we want to know what the problem is in terms of all of this negative behavior we still see. Of course, it's not as worse as it was 10 years ago when it wasn't even talk, it was shoot, you know. Misnomer, being misnamed, and miseducated, misdirected. So we're trying to still find this piece that's missing in our psychological mechanisms that allows right behavior, successful behavior, achieving behavior, unfolding behavior. Where has it been all of these years? A, hidden. Where? In the Masonic order. In esoteric schools of thought. In literatures that never got to the places our parents were going to buy things. Because in 1955, there was probably no such thing as an African-American bookstore. That's a recent invention of approximately 30, 35 years, you see, where a large segment of relevant books put in one place, see. In the Masonic order, you take an oath not to tell what you learn. See? So it closes at that door. Noble Drew Ali's group started around 1922, where he and his followers, a little handful of people, began dealing with the concept of nationality as a movement in terms of the Holy Moorish Science Temple of America, what he founded. and brought forward this partial explanation of identity as a nationality. See? And the concept that deals with your psychology is this concept. Can you see that back there? Okay. Your ethnic identity. See, because nationality-wise, we're all Americans. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. You're a citizen of America. The ethnic identity deals with your blood, your brain, and the stuff in your blood, your genetic code that keeps making dark skin, broad nose, thick lips, and furrowed hair, wherever mama is on the planet. That's the key to your ethnicity. The other concept is eponymy, the eponymistic state. You'll find, I don't think I'll do that, go to the dictionary. It's in the dictionary, a very important word that shows that if the father takes a wife, impregnates his wife, moves to a certain land or property, gives his wife his name and gives his child his name and gives his land his name. That's the eponymistic state of existence. The name that you will find that relates to that is this name. Okay. Can you read that? That's the way Yochanan wrote it, Misraim. Misraim in the Bible. I think this is MZR, if I'm not mistaken. The first clear evidence of that is Misraim. The one that begins the handle of that is this man's name. Ham, whose name is not Ham, but is Cam, whose name is not Cam, but is which is pronounced in most literatures as Hammurabi. This is three names. Hammurabi. Black fire. Lord of the earth. Master teacher. Hammurabi. Or Hammurabi, which is referred to as the lawgiver. Then Bobby mentioned this, that we don't have that much proof of in terms of historical fact, because we're talking a past that is legend more than it is artifice. See, what verifies the past is the artifice found by those who search the soil, the earth, to find the evidence of a past. Hammurabi, Lemuria, and Mitzrayim are the major keys in terms of research. This is considered to be a Hebrew name, so what one should do is retranslate it back to where it comes from rather than what it's translated into. We know if they were Africans, they didn't have Hebrew names, or at least we should know that much. But first we need to know what Hebrew is and what it means before we even do that. In the American English Dictionary, right after the word black elder, you will find the word blackamoor in this book. It's been there. It's been there since Noah Daniel Webster structured this English American dictionary. He's not the author of the original English dictionary. That's Edward Johnson of England. Remember that this is an English language we speak, which means it's a Latin language we speak. I won't spend the time paging through that, but just keep in mind, in terms of evidence written, you'll find the concept blackamoor. Then you'll find the concept Moor. And it's interesting to read both of those. Moor is given in the dictionary as anyone living in North Africa. I bought a 1958 Funk and Wagnall dictionary at Goodwill in West End for 25 cents. And the reason I bought it because I turned right to the B's and looked up blackamoor. And it said, Negro, dark skin, black person. And then in parentheses, a word no longer used. Blew me away, blew me away. So the evidence is available but scattered. It's not in one place. No one intended for it to be in one place. If you wonder why it has taken so long to even come to this point of having a level of insight to this clarity of identity. To know what it means is to give, again, to give back the prestige to your thinking, when you can think with the idea of being Lord of the earth. You see? A concept that we don't fully cognize, you know, from this subservient level in which we've been operating. See? But to raise a child who senses as well as consciously knows that he is by his nature named Lord of the earth is to give a new psychology to a human being, which means you're making another kind of human being who thinks from his highest or her highest vantage point in her or his nature. That's its other plus, its other benefit. You change psychologies when a child knows who he or she is and can think from that vantage point. You see? If they're not thinking from that vantage point, they're inflicted with the illusion of inferiority as a complex. See? Anytime you think less of yourself, it is indicative of a complex. And what I like about the concept is that exactly what it is and what it was meant to be was to create the illusion of being inferior. You see? And it worked. They created the illusion. They created the Negro in America. You see, that's why a Negro has no rights. He has no past. He has no accomplishments. Achieved absolutely nothing. It was the Moor who achieved, who has the past. The book that lends strength to that concept is this book, The Golden Age of the Moor. There has been another book to outdo it, so I don't have another one plus this one. This is it, The Golden Age of the Moors. Everybody in our group should have it somewhere within their reach. It's that valuable. There are a few loose ends that Dr. Van Sertima did not tie up, but he certainly did an excellent job in compiling a group of essays concerning this record of the past, not his story. See? That's what's in the back of your subconscious, the records of your past. That's what we're looking for. in terms of accomplishments, achievements, successes, pronouncements, inventions, creativity. See, the gathered wealth of the past. See, your ability to lay the foundation of governorship in the land, to structure a civilization to live by and to give forward to the next generation. Those are the records of the past. And at the center of that is self, the center of knowledge on this planet is about self. Not Jesus, not Muhammad, not Buddha. Okay? It is about you. How do I know that? First by study and then by a statement. This book is not about Jesus. It is not about Jehovah. This book is about you. And it's found in this concept, which is emphasized in separating the two books. Testament. Does that spell right? Or should this be T-I? Is that right? Okay, all right. It looked a little strange up there, writing it so large. This is the Latin.
Testy.
That's where this word comes from. Testimenti. Testi, body, or testicles. Okay. Menti, mind. Old body, old mind. New body, new mind. That's what this book is about. Okay. But on top of it, on the surface, is this doctrine.
So he's saying that the Bible, when you got the Old Testament and the New Testament, the Old Testament is about the old mindset, and then the New Testament is about the new mind that was placing in you.
That the theologians scraped off to present to the believer. Not to the knower, not to the seeker of truth and knowledge, but to the knower. The system is based upon this number. Where do you first meet this number? Anybody? The most constant place you see this number is where? No, before you get there. Where? Before you get there. Before you get there. It's got to be the clock. the constant 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of night. You see? The measurement of the moving of time in space and circumstances. There are 66 books to the Protestants' scripture. This is the Protestant Bible. This is not the first Bible. How many sons does Jacob have? How many disciples did Jesus have?
12.
How many stars are there in the heavens?
12.
Tricked you there, didn't they? There are only 12 in this book. The heaven in this book is not the same one up there. Though they're up there, but in this book it's 12. There are 12 gates. There are 12 pearls. I mean, the 12 goes on and on and on to set a standard. And it doesn't start off in the deep part of this book. The Kabbalistic writers got busy on chapter 1. Verse 14. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. What is that? No, it's not, can't be astrology, because it's not calculation yet. It's got to be what? It's got to be astronomy. Yes. The presentation of the heavens as the measuring device for the activities on this planet. That is in chapter 1 of the book of Genesis. How many Christians you think know that? You can count them on one finger, not one hand. Yeah? Because they're not in pursuit of knowledge, which means that they're not in pursuit of self-knowledge. One of the most important theorems of the Kemetic culture was, man, know thyself, and you will know the gods. Then be true to yourself. It's right here in this book. Man, know thyself, and to thine own self be true. It should be on the head post of every church that black folks walk through. And you won't find it on none of them, because they're not going in there to get self-knowledge.
Just like in the Bible, one of the most important quotes in the book, because a lot of the stuff in the Bible and the Quran as well, it say, my people will perish from a lack of what? It didn't say, it could have said, that quote could have said anything to lead our people. But it said our people will, it didn't say our people will perish for a lack of love of Jesus, Buddha, Allah. It didn't say our people will perish for a lack of love for each other. It said our people will perish for a lack of knowledge.
They're going in to hear about Jesus. And they've been hearing the same group of sermons for over 100 years. The same sermons. Over and over. You know, it's amazing how ignorance prevails. It is amazing. And they got this book stuck under their arm. Chock full, based on Moorish science. The reason we know that, because it's based on the Kabbalistic system of writing. And that is a Moorish invention. How do we know that? Because of the circle. Who measured the circle first? Your parents. Measured out the 12. Gave them 12 names. The 12 names of those signs are translated into 12 sons in this book. They're called the sons of Jacob. Those are the 12 signs of the zodiac. That is not astrology. That's zodiac science. That's the square zodiac before you get to the round zodiac. What I'm emphasizing here is not only the importance of self-knowledge, is that somebody knew it was important, put it in a book, and gave it to you, and didn't tell you it was in there. That's the easiest way to hide it. It's just hand it to you. You know? It's amazing, you know? I mean, it's you're talking about clever, crafty, and cunning. Those are three Masonic terms. White boy is clever, crafty, and cunning. John chapter 10, verses 31 to 36, is the central theme of all knowledge on planet Earth. I don't see nobody writing that down. Unless you already know. If you already know, that's fine. But I like to see pencils get busy when I mention that one if you don't know about it. 31 to 36.
John 31 to 36.
All knowledge on this planet. Whichever one you all want to read that. John chapter 10, verses 31 to 36. Read it out loud so they can hear you, my sister. Don't be embarrassed. You're among friends. Verse 31. Yes, beginning of chapter 10. Chapter 10, verses 31 to 36. I thought I handed it to you. I got it marked there. Right, start reading.
Then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. Jesus answered them, "Many good works have I received from my Father. For which offense do ye stone me?" The Jews answered him, saying, "For a good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy, and because that thou, being a man, makest thyself God." Jesus answered them, "Is it not written in your law, I said ye are God?"
Stop. Read that again.
Jesus answered them, "Is it not written in your law?"
He said, Jesus answered them, "Is it not written in your law
I said, ye are gods?
that ye are gods?"
If he called them gods, unto whom the word of God came,
If he called them gods into whom the word of God came,
and the scripture cannot be broken.
then the scripture cannot be broken.
Okay, that's good. I want you to stop that because I want you to go to where he points to. If your scriptures so read, then they cannot be broken. The scripture he's talking about is Psalm 82. Turn to the middle of the Bible.
And he said the scripture he's referring to is Psalms 82.
Midway in the Bible. Verse 5. Verse 5, read there.
They know not, neither will they understand.
They know not, neither will they understand. And live on in the darkness.
They walk on in the darkness. All the foundations of the earth are out of course.
All of the foundations of the earth are out of course.
Go on.
I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High.
I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High.
But ye shall die like men
But ye shall die like men
and fall into
and fall into trenches.
Okay. Let's stop there. G-O-D, code word. G-O-D is not God's name, put it that way. Generator, operator, destroyer is the codex inscriptus of these three letters given to the English-speaking Masons by one of your ancestors, Benjamin Banneker Bay, Big Ben, because before that they were using this concept. That's an old Bible. If you found one of those, you'd probably have to pay $200 or $300 for it. Dios, deity. G is the brain, generator. O is the soul, operator. D, the destroyer, is your sacral vertebrae where the cosmic fire comes up that destroys darkness, fear, disease, poverty, and sickness. That's what makes you God. And you're in the making of that from now on. There's no point where you reach this, because there's no point where infinity stops. That's your destiny. That's the journey. The Torah, the Tarot, the journey is into the nature of infinity. You see? The most important concept in human culture is the revelation of this truth, not on a blackboard or in a book or in a classroom, inside. Is why it's important. Because when it comes inside, it changes and keeps changing you and keeps changing you and keeps changing. Why dignity is rightfully yours by your nature. Why God has so many names. That's what name means, nature. So your name means something to your nature. Even though it's in English, you know, the slave master's language, well, the slave master didn't create language. The universe did. And the universe speaks all languages. And all language is relevant to human beings, wherever they are. Whatever they're thinking with is relevant to what they're thinking with. The cerebral nervous system. And so your American English name is relevant to your abilities, your powers, your function abilities, your nature, your character, your characteristic traits, the cycle of your life is all relevant in terms of your name. Whatever your name is. Okay. I think I have a copy of it. I wanted to show you. I have a copy. Did I bring it? It's the question I'm asking myself at this particular moment. If I didn't, it's laying right on top of my table where I looked at it all day yesterday and all day, all afternoon. I didn't, did I? Let me see. I have a rather peculiar copy of.
And even that head on that picture is 30% bigger than the average skull. That's another proof that our ancient ancestors used to have, it's called elongating skulls, where they push the head back further so the brain could grow.
I don't want to waste too much time looking for it. I can still talk about it without it. I wanted to have some kind of image here to show you. I can't find it right now. The cover of the Moorish Science Quran Circle 7 was the legacy of the Moorish temple's inheritance. And they didn't know it until I got down here. Well, let me do it this way. It's not just a circle, it is the zodiac and the 4 gates with the 7 in the center. And every Friday they get it and turn the cover and go right past the science. So they ended up with a religion to believe. See? That this is the standard of all organized thought on planet Earth. Everyone with life is born in that circle of zodiac, is recorded in that circle. That's from the smallest ant to the brightest star, happens inside this circle. The 7 is symbolic of perfection on the physical plane. It is also symbolic of the 7 planets in our solar system. The moon and the sun are luminaries, they're not planets. They're only counted as planets in the numerical order of things of 9. 7 also represents a very unique concept. I'll do it this way. This is the latest revelation I got from this circle. Oh, nobody saw that, right? Did anybody see that? I was wondering where this one was. Right.
This videotape so old, y'all.
Heart. Right in the center of the circle, the number 7. And it was just a couple of months ago I got this. And I've had this pamphlet since 70, but that revelation just came, only recently. You notice K-O-R-A-N is not Quran. You notice it's spelled with a K. The first time I noticed that was on the marquee of a Masonic lodge on 32nd and Euclid in Cleveland, Ohio. The Al-Quran Masonic Lodge. And I thought, how come it's spelled with a K instead of a Q? You know, and I kept walking and kept walking. You know. And nothing happened, you know, but it stayed on my mind. It stayed on my mind. One day, a few years ago, Spirit released the whole thing. Just released it. You know? Knowledge, order, rhythm, astrology, nature. That's what you study. There isn't anything else. It's not, this is the way you spell Quran on the Quran. Q-U-R-A-N. And brothers made extra efforts to get it right. Quran. Well, what we supplement to be knowledge. Now here is the interesting thing. Keep this word in mind. I want to show you why this is so interesting in terms of code inscribed, hidden knowledge. Right? That's who you are, right? Right? Let me hear a nod or something, unless you don't want to be Lord now. That's when you're perfecting, when you master the heart. That's the difference between Negro and Moor. Between G-O-D and even this.
Man.
That's what man means. And the first man is who? Who's the first man, sister?
Master.
I like to put you on the
man
spot.
means master, able, noble.
Womb who? No, it's not woman. Look at it. It's right there. Womb man. That's the first man. That's mama. That's how you get down here. Ain't nobody higher than her down here. But we've been treating her like we're higher than she is. Walking behind us. Yeah, I mean, it's a strange idea if you think about it. She who rocked you to sleep and woke you up every morning and fed you your first breakfast. Walk behind me. That's deep, man. If you wonder why the planet has been so foul to the male population, and it's been foul to the male population, it's given them the energy of war instead of the energy of love. Because they mistreat the highest symbol of love on this planet. This is a female planet. Uh-oh, your ass in trouble. Yeah, it has much to do with that. And until we straighten it out, there will be wars and rumors of wars. Hell, history bears me out. You know, don't need to try to prove it. And I want you to see what you're going to study in this course in terms of this body of real Moorish science. If I can get this to stay up there without falling off. These are the 12 essence of Moorish science. This includes the esoteric schools, the Masonic order, the metaphysical school, the New Age movement. It does not include the Negro Baptist Church, but it does include the Negro Baptist preacher, because 80% of them are Masons. Symbology is the language of nature. And the first way we have to prove that is with this very conspicuous symbol that all humanity can see. Let me take this down for a minute before it falls. I'll draw it this way. Where do you find this symbol? Anybody but Bobby already knows. Where do you see this? There's no such thing as a crescent moon. The moon is always full. It's a matter of what's passing between the sun and the earth that gives this shadowing, this art of nature that presents this illusion of a half moon, a crescent moon, a quarter moon. There's no such thing as a 5-pointed star in the heavens. There are 4 points, 8 points, 16 points. But if you cut a Macintosh apple open horizontally, you'll find a perfect 5-pointed star inside the Macintosh apple. See, on several types of leaves, you'll find a perfect symmetrical 5-pointed star. The 5-pointed starfish in the ocean represents nature's design of the 5 points, which is man. The 5 points of projection is the symbolic representation of that 5-pointed star. What's that? What is it? Right. Arm, leg, leg, arm, head. But that's not Arabic. Those are English letters. Okay. And that's important to cognize. Okay. Not Aleph, Lam, Lam, Hamza. Okay. The Codex Inscriptus, the code written into the scriptures, the dictionary, and other esoteric writings is a part of the essence of Moorish science. Symbology does not begin with the European. It begins with nature. The first custodians of that knowledge were your ancestors, who interpreted and translated through vision, perception, and clear logic the meaning of nature and designed it for the recording for the future in pictographic language called Agu, according to Yosef ben Yachanan, which means to scribble, scratch, or draw. Numbers are part of that language. How many months did it take you to have your child, young lady? How many? Only 8. Oh, okay, you're the exception. Well, it should have taken you 9. Oh, I'm pushing it down. Okay. Very good, okay. How many numbers are there in mathematics? Thank you. How many planets are there in our solar system? Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me back there? Okay. How much is 3, 6, and 0? Okay. So there's something up symbolically with the number 9. Okay. How's that look? Pretty straight out there, y'all? Okay, thank you. Numerology and universal law. I group those together because the concept numeros in the Latin means number. But numeros means harmony, melody, and metric is the meaning of number. See? These and so forth are the symbols that represent harmony, metric, and melody, which is what supports the universe. Numeros. That is universal law. Functioning, doing what it does, because it is what it is. The essence of what truth is, that which changes everything and changes not. If you want to know what truth is, that which changes everything, yet changes not. Those are the 7 pillars. I went and got the wrong book here. I'm supposed to reach and grab this wonderful little book here. This has become my Bible, and you need one of these. Don't want one, need one. It's a marvelous little book. There hasn't been anybody that's come up with anything any better. What's the brother's name that did Ancient Future? He incorporated it in his book. Tried to improve on it and almost got in the way of the universal law. I can't think of his name. Yes, Chandler. Right, very good, yeah. It's worth having, but it's clear from this perspective. So be sure and get yourself a copy of the Kybalion. That's the Greek word for Kabbalah. We'll eventually, in the course of the 12 weeks, take several looks at universal law because they don't go away. I mean, you know, okay, I mean, as you study and study and begin to think with them, your own spirit, your own mind will show you where they are in what you read and how to use them because you're always using them. You live, move, and have your being in Him. That's not Jesus. It's universal mind that you live, move, and have your being in. And if you function with universal law will function with you. That's the major key to success. As a man thinketh in his heart, whatever a man conceives and believes, he will achieve. The psychological assumption automatically provides the means for fulfilling the dream desire. Universal law of mind in action. That's how the mind works. But it works both ways. It will work for you or it'll work for you. In other words, if you fail, it's because you programmed yourself to fail. It's no one's fault. If you succeed, it's because you program yourself to succeed. It's your glory. Of course, you give thanks to the universe. That's always good. So your ego doesn't get out of whack. It is I who have created all things. I've come. You don't need to read the 2 books before you get there. I've created all. I've done it all. Oh boy, then here comes nature to kick your legs out from under you, put you back into perspective. Astrology and astrotheology. This book, where's my Bible? Thank you. Is based on astrological physiology and astrological theology. How do we know that? It's based on 12. That's how we know it. It's based on 12. And it's based on 12 and who? The son of who? Come on, somebody help me out. The son of who? Can y'all see that from back there? Oh, okay, let me move this out of the way. Can you see it now? Can you see that now? It's almost still too low, huh? Based on the Son of God. You see that, don't you? In the center? What do you see in the center of the circle? Come on, y'all. It's there. You don't have to, it ain't no vision. It's the Son, isn't it? The only Son of God in this solar system. You see? And all men who come as the Son of God represent this divine sphere. No, that's good enough. We're not going to get too far into it. I just want to make this emphasis because I'm not trying to take away anything from the divine beings who came before us. If they weren't gods, then we are not gods. You see? But I'm saying this, you're not looking for them. You're looking for yourself. And that's what this book, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, the Rig Vedas, all of the ancient literatures, the ancient Book of the Dead, or the Book of the Master of the Secret House, is not the Book of the Dead. That's what it's telling you. And it begins in Genesis chapter 1.
Well, it's the Book of the Dead because the people or the nation of people who made the book are now considered dead mentally.
No, not chapter 1, chapter 5. When Noah built the ark, okay, let's go back here. I'm trying to inscribe this concept of 12 in the circle. That's why I keep going back to it. Yeah, okay, that's good right there, okay. Look at these 2 words. These are interchangeable because I can spell Catherine with a K and I can spell Catherine with a C. This is the ark hidden behind this ark. Okay. How do we know that? Because of the next statement, which is what? Noah built the ark. Then what did he do? Come on, you Baptist folks, all y'all Baptists, and don't be jabbing me, every one of you Baptists. He brought in all the animals. How many at a time? 2. By 2.
My fault, y'all. I got a phone call.
Astronomical map. The lamb and the donkey. That's Libra is the donkey. We'll get into how that's proven. The bull and the scorpion. Here in the astronomy chart, it's the eagle. Gemini and Sagittarius, the human and the horseman. Capricorn and Cancer, the goat and the crab, Leo and Aquarius, the lion and the human animal. 2 by 2. That's all the animals there are. There are only 12 animals in this book. Okay? If you wonder how Adam named all the animals, okay? We're going to take a close look at that. The metaphysics of the astrological theology.
I would say, I'm guessing that those would be the 12 animals that he seen where he was on the land.
Is based on the story of the unfolding of the spiritual man, whose name is what? In Genesis chapter 2, he begins. What's his name? Right. That's his name. It's Adam.
Adam.
Okay. And to the second Adam. That's his name, Atom. The evolution of the atom to the spiritual height of the atom. That's Christ. Christos. Gres. In the ancient Kemetic language, it is Gres. Crowned, anointed, and mummified is what Gres means. Horus. Maybe not the first Horus, but one of them. There were several, according to Kemetic records. The stories that you're reading about is that evolution, that development, that journey of the soul to the point of unfolding, to its highest point of divinity, of man. This book does not deal with the cosmic being. It only deals with the superconscious being. And it certainly does not deal with the infinite. The infinite is not in here. But a representative of his is in here. Tehute, in the book of Job. The one who came in the whirlwind. The metaphysics. Meta, above physics. Above physics. The laws above physics is metaphysics, which means the mental physics that governs the physical. Mind governs the physical. 5 minutes? Okay. We're going to look at the square zodiac and the round zodiac in this book. The myth makers, your parents, those who structured mythos, the ancient writings, the fables, the hidden truths. Scriptural symbology, which is different from universal symbology. In other words, if I took all of the 12 names of the sons of Jacob out of the Bible, it wouldn't have any relevance to astrology. They're only relevant to astrology in this book. That's just an example. Masonry and the science of masonry, how it's connected to Moorish science. Some great black masons of our history that will surprise you, such as Jack Johnson. And the Codex Inscriptus. And of course, meditation techniques will be given. How to meditate and the techniques you use before you meditate, because technique and meditation are not the same. I lost my page here. I want to go right to the Codex Inscriptus. See if I can do this without taking too much time. The 12 sons of Jacob are not the 12 tribes of Israel. We're going to take a look at that so you know the difference and have the evidence of why rather than belief. You don't have to believe me. All you have to do is check up on me, because I give you the material to check up on me with. This is the Codex Inscriptus, the structure inside of it. Allegorical language and stories, fables and stories, the mythologies that are where hidden knowledge is placed in the story form, the legend, cosmic law, astronomy, astrological theology, sign and ensigns, again, symbolic language in such clear-cut forms that you don't think they're symbols. And one of those I love to do is show you the statement on the back of the dollar bill. It says, in God we trust. And that isn't what it says. And it's right in your face, you know, but it's so symbolically ensigned that you don't know it's a sign. It says, in God we trust one. And you turn it over, and that's the one they trust. Cryptological writ, which includes the mathematical code in the scriptures, is a part of the cryptology of the scriptures. And symbology numbers, or symbological numbers. Mathematics and symbology is the essential part of biblical writing. Two extremes that seem to have no relevancy is the substance of esoteric writing for all scriptures. The universal law that holds everything up and holds everything together. Without rhythm, there is no life, no continuity, no form, no shape, no functionality. When the rhythm is bad, the results are bad. When the rhythm is chaotic, the results are chaotic. When the rhythm is down low, the results, the behavior, the thinking is down low. When the rhythm depreciates, that's a rhythm of death. When the rhythm is high, that's a rhythm of life. That's what you're standing on, is what supports the turning and the moving of this enormous planet in its solar system and stays in its orbital position and doesn't run into Jupiter and run into Mars and run all off based on the law of rhythm. So it's important to know that you think with rhythm, that you conceive and perceive with the law of rhythm. If you want to know why black folks are musically addicted to music, because they can sense the law of rhythm. But it's what the musicians are interpreting it to be. They're not giving it back the way it comes to them. To regain the equilibrium of the soul is a supposed reason the African interpreted the music of the spheres. To re-establish the equilibrium, the balance of the soul is the reason your ancestors interpreted. Notice I'm not saying invented. This is a musical creation, so you know we didn't invent it. Interpret music. The 2-4-6-8 rhythm of melanin is what puts you in tune with the universe. But there's a low and a high. Bad music, low. Great music, high. If you want to know why behind this stupid behavior is all this rapping and the bitch and the bitch and the who and the behind it, behind the bad behavior is bad music, bad rhythm, bad behavior. And it's not going to change until they change the music, the lyrics, and the rhythm. It's not going to change. They're getting rich on it, but they're killing us, literally. You see? The crown chakra, this marvelous head that only a few select black folks seem to be able to recreate. There aren't that many on this scale. The oval shape is still there. I mean, I see it all the time. Little brothers with them peanut heads, you know. Well, that's a wonderful cranium, because that's the way their brain is shaped. And the secret is back here. The occipital prominence is the real secret to that wonderful head. We might find out what that means. I don't know. There's a lot of information on here. We could go on to the next class. I'll break down here. Hebrew, you see it's next to an astrological construct. And here, this is supposed to be a web here, okay? Why that's a web